president's authority to prevent foreign nationals from entering the country is one of his greatest and highest authorities. He's operating at the apex of executive power when he does so. Congress, likewise, has codified and cemented that authority by giving the Department of Homeland Security and the Secretary of State plenary authority to reject the entry of foreign nationals into this country, which is what makes that Harvard ruling from this crazy judge so obscene. Harvard defied multiple DHS subpoenas for information about its foreign students and about law-breaking and national security threats on campus. Harvard has engaged in decades of invidious, unlawful, and illegal race-based discrimination against American citizens. So Harvard is engaged in illegal and criminal conduct, and a judge is siding with Harvard's right to pad his pockets with foreign cash over the rights of American citizens and the American Constitution. The Democrat Party's philosophy right now is for foreigners, everything, for Americans, nothing. President Trump is fighting for American workers, for the blue-collar workers, and for the middle class of this country.
Whoa, okay. All right. All right, guys. Stephen Miller. I'm going to talk about Stephen Miller a bit to start the show, because as you can see, Pee Wee German is over the top with his enforcement of the belief that the president has the ultimate executive power, that the president can protect the country, the president can demand information from universities like Harvard. He is the ultimate power in the universe. And it relates to what we're going to talk about the rest of the show. But first of all, no, fuck no. That's not how our system works. The Constitution empowers all three branches of government equally. They are co-equal branches of government, but not for Nosferatu, okay? So here's another clip, and then this is him talking about the courts. Again, talking about a co-equal branch of government.
You cannot have a democracy where single individual district court judges can assume the full total powers of the commander-in-chief. Even on the Supreme Court, it takes agreement of 5 Supreme Court justices to change a federal policy. 5. A single district court judge out of 700 cannot set policy for the entire nation, let alone on national security and public safety issues. The president has been clear that he has tremendous respect for Justice Roberts and believes it's essential the Supreme Court crack down and stop this assault on our democracy from these radical rogue judges that are usurping the powers of the presidency and laying waste to our entire constitutional system.
Okay. Keep in mind, our system is pretty set. This isn't a new thing. We've had judges, we've had the judicial branch for the whole damn time. And yes, a single district judge can't put an injunction. Now, the system is the government can appeal that to the full, to an appeals court. They'll do maybe, they can do an en banc, or they can do the full appeals court. The system is designed exactly how it operates. The difference is that these wannabe fascists don't like that. Okay, they want to use executive power to write executive orders, to attack law firms, to do all the things. Feels like a king, doesn't it? I mean, if you think about the way Stephen Miller approaches the power of the executive branch, it's just like a king. The king has ultimate power. The king has all the power of the government. And if you don't believe me, that's his philosophy, that he doesn't believe that the government, that any should be able to hold them back. Let me look at his philosophy. Let's look at real quickly at a shot from April of 2023, 2 years ago, on Don Jr.'s show, where he and Don Jr. talk about how he thinks Stephen Miller, who's now, by the way, a counselor of the president or some other freaking job. Let's think, this is his philosophy of power in America. No, we're talking about America. Watch.
The committees in Congress can act now. They can use their subpoena power now. They can hold hearings now. They can drag people up to get deposed right now when it matters. I think the whole lesson here, whether you call yourself a conservative or a traditionalist or a nationalist or a populist, whatever your label is, if you're one of those people who's right thinking, who's not part of the crazy left, what you have to learn how to do is use the machinery of government, use the machinery of society to impose your will when you have the authority to do so.
Impose your will on society, tools of society, the tools of the government to impose your will. I don't know about you guys. We had a whole ass revolution about this, didn't we? I mean, we did have an entire revolution about the imperial authority of a king who was abusing his citizens for decades until it became intolerable that they would do whatever they wanted. that he had ultimate power to decide. He could ship people overseas to be tried. He could put soldiers in your house. You had no authority. That's the style of power that Stephen Miller wants. So I thought in that 200, as we approach the 250th anniversary of this nation next year, 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the whole document that kind of defines this whole damn thing, it would be a great time to talk to somebody who studied the documents, studied that document, studied that moment in history, and put it in perspective of someone like Stephen Miller trying to oppose royal power on Donald Trump's administration. And let's keep in mind, you don't really think Donald Trump's doing this. Now, Stephen Miller is the power behind there, and that's what it's doing. And we'll talk more about that, I'm sure. But in the meantime, I am Fred Wellman. This is On Democracy, FP Wellman, exclusively in the Midas Touch Network. You're here on Friday night. I love seeing you guys here. As you know, we record this, but then we go live tonight. I just love being with you guys. I appreciate it. I hope you'll tell your friends. I hope you'll hit subscribe, of course, with Midas Touch, but over on the On Democracy channel as well. In the meantime, I've got a great historian, Eli Merritt, Dr. Eli Merritt from Vanderbilt University, going to talk to us about this issue. Let's get on with the show. Welcome. I am still Fred Wellman. This is still On Democracy with FP Wellman, right here exclusive from the Midas Touch Network. So good to see so many of you showing up. I love that you come here to see us premiere this episodes every week live. You can look in the chat. I'll be in the chat saying hi to you guys because I'm sitting at home, probably with a beer in my hand or something. It's so great to have you. I love my new time slot. I'm so glad to see so many familiar faces when you join us this show. So it's just what a great time, what an exciting time. As always, I try to, as I mentioned before the music, I try to find guests to talk about issues. And one of my things, if you haven't been a long time follower of the show, is I love historians come on the show to tie together the historic ideas and the things we should have learned in the past that tied it together as a moment. And I had the pleasure of speaking to Dr. Eli Merritt from Vanderbilt, I think 2 years ago. Yikes, the show's been on a while. I think before we joined Midas Touch, to be honest with you, and he posted a great subset this week as he does. I said, you know what, I gotta get you at the show. So I want to welcome Eli back to the show. Eli, welcome to the show. I think it's been 2 years ago when sparked by one of your Substacks, and here we are. And welcome to the show. It's good to see you again, sir.
Thanks, Fred. We talked about saving democracy 2 years ago. We didn't quite succeed, so I'm sure we'll keep talking about that.
I know. I was like, damn it. That was exactly what we talked about is, you had a new book out talking about the rise of demagogues and we have a demagogue. But now you're talking about the Declaration of Independence, which I am passionate about. For those who understand, we are on the 250th anniversary year of our nation. I don't know if we haven't talked about that more, but the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence is coming up this July 4th with cool fireworks and democracy. You're developing a series of talks about the Declaration for the anniversary. Do you find yourself struggling to separate today's politics from that time as an expert in the revolution and the Declaration?
Oh, no, my mind is constantly between history and what's going on now.
There's no separation, right?
It's a constant nexus. And so I'm continuing to do what I was doing 2 years ago when we spoke, which is writing and teaching, and with a specialty in the area of the intersections of demagogues and democracy, which we can talk about some more. But I have, over the past 2 to 3 months, particularly on my Substack, I've added a new dimension that does relate to the forthcoming 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and therefore also of the nation, which is on July 4th in 2026. And so on my Substack now, I shifted to mainly writing a series called The Story of the American Revolution, which is of historical importance because of the 250th anniversary, but also there's text and subtext. A lot of the subtext really tells us and teaches us what we can and should do and what's historically been done in our own nation when we are threatened by oppression or we're threatened by tyranny. So we can get into that some. And I think you were referring earlier, I was just very pleased within the past week or two to be invited by the National Constitution Center.
Yeah.
Give a talk. They said, give it on the principles of the Declaration of Independence. I said, I will, but let's call it the enduring principles of the Declaration of Independence. So I've already gotten that out on the wire and have that set up to give 5 times already. Wow. I'll hope to keep getting that talk, the enduring principles of the Declaration of Independence, for at least the next year, if not more.
Well, let's talk about a couple of those. I know you're still writing it. You're gathering the thoughts. I told you, I promised I wouldn't make you do talking points from it. But as you sit as a historian in this moment and you look at it, I mean, obviously you had, I think I can't imagine. I mean, I'm a writer too. As you sit down to write, you're like, here's this sparked me. What sparked you? Like, what are the key connections you see at this moment here in 2025, a year from the anniversary, to what our founding fathers had to deal with?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say this. Let me just do something I've never done before, which is put myself in the persona of Alexander Hamilton.
All right, do it.
Okay, Alexander Hamilton, we're here on your show with you, Fred, and you said, give us an assessment. What's happened? I am absolutely persuaded due to my reading of Alexander Hamilton, some of the other founders too, is he would say, Fred, what have you all done with our republic? And he would most notably say, how is it possible that you all made the grievous mistake in a republic or a democracy of allowing a demagogue to ascend to executive power? And it's not just that that sounds bad on the face of it, but he wrote very clearly in Federalist Number 1 and numerous of his other Federalist papers that don't ever let a demagogue, whatever checks and balances you need to prevent the demagogue from rising to executive power, don't do it, because once the demagogue drinks at the cup of power, what happens? The demagogue, which has a seated authoritarian within him or her always, grows more and more authoritarian. So that's what ends up constituting tyranny. So that's his famous quotation: demagogues will commence as demagogues, but they will end as tyrants. So he would say he would say stupid. I would say we have been incredibly ignorant across our political parties in the way we structured our democracy in order to allow a demagogue to run for president. It didn't have to be this way, but we have fatal flaws or structural defects in our system that allowed that. That's what Hamilton would say. So now we're at the place where we do have oppressive government, authoritarian government. I think if the founders were looking at us today, they would say, you've got tyranny or threatened tyranny in executive power. So you need to begin to contemplate, how are you going to resist? And what are you going to do if the resistance fails? And we'll get to that, but I'll stop with that, Brett.
Hey guys, this may shock you, but I'm aging. I think I'm the oldest guy in the Midas Touch Network. I don't want to assume that, but I'm pretty damn sure I am. And I'm fine with that. I'm doing great, living large. But I have stiff joints. Sleep's not that great these days. I have real health concerns. Of course, as I've told you guys before, I just had back surgery. I missed a few shows. You guys know that I'm aging, and it's important to me to try and stay young, keep up with everybody, keep in the fight for our democracy. So that's why I try to find every way I can. So it takes a lot of time, money, and energy to focus on all these different wellness products and supplements. I mean, it would be great just to have one product that kind of helps it all. And I'm really excited to share that you guys, that C15 from Fatty 15 is the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in more than 90 years. And it's an incredible scientific breakthrough to support our long-term health and wellness. And you guessed it, like me, aging and longevity, which is why I think they want me to talk. You know, Fatty 15 co-founder Dr. Stephanie Van Watson discovered the benefits of C15 while she was working with the U.S. Navy to continue to improve the health and welfare of aging dolphins, of all things. Over 100 studies show that C15 strengthens our cells. It's a key longevity-enhancing nutrient, which helps to slow biological aging at the cellular level. In fact, when your cells don't have enough C15, they become fragile and you kind of age faster. And when your cells age, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of the aging process. Bodies age too. So, you know, there's a lot of studies in this. There's studies that show as many as 1 in 3 people worldwide may have low C15 levels and cellular fragility syndrome. So it's good to get some kind of help. Fatty 15 is a science-backed, award-winning, vegan, patented, 100% pure C15 supplement. It's vegan-friendly, free of flavors, allergens, or preservatives. Fatty 15 has 3 times more cellular benefits from omega-3 than omega-3 or fish oil. That's 3 times more than omega-3 or fish oil. Replenishes your cells with essential C15 nutrients. Fatty 15 essentially, effectively repairs our cells and restores our long-term health. So look, Fatty 15 is on a mission to optimize your C15 levels, help support your long-term health and wellness, especially as you age. Now, you can get an additional 15% off when you purchase this for the first time. I'm thrilled to be sponsored. You can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/Fred and using Fred at checkout. That's F-R-E-D. So like I said it again, you can get a lot of good deals here. So 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/Fred and use coding Fred at checkout. I'm Fred Wellman. Check it out. Have you ever searched your name in Google or your address, put it in there? No, I do. And it's shocking what you'll find, how many results have your personal information. It's not by chance. Data brokers, people who search sites, collect your personal information. They want your name, your address, your phone number, your financial information, your income, hundreds of other records, your address, where you live. They sell it and they share it publicly without your consent. I know this personally. Maybe you make somebody mad on the internet and they look up your house. It's that easy and it's that scary. But Incogni is here to put an end to that. It hunts down these unethical sites and gets your info removed from places that expose your private information. You don't have to email anyone, fill out forms, jump through a bunch of hoops, just constantly work it in fear a lot of times. They handle the entire process for you. Now, Incogni continuously monitors your data is put back on these databases as well, requesting repeated removals. This way, it keeps that information out there forever because it sneaks back on, folks. You can't just do it one time. So this way, you'll get a lot less spam calls, spam emails, more peace of mind, and you won't worry about your family's safety or all the crazy things we're dealing with in this unusual time for our lives. Best of all, you can cancel anytime. They offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can get it completely risk-free, and I really recommend it highly, not just because they're a sponsor. It's a service that is important in this crazy time. I know right now you can get 60% off an annual plan by going to incogni.com and use code democracy. That's incogni.com/democracy and use the code democracy at checkout to get the discount code from here at Wellman on democracy. I'm telling you guys, this is a service you need. I'm a huge fan and a user. That's incogni.com/democracy. 60% off. Thanks for being a sponsor of the show. We really appreciate you. And thanks for this important service.
As we look at the enduring principles of the Declaration of Independence, I'm developing those. You never want to have too many enduring principles, but I will say the number two, the two primary principles that sparked the resistance against first the Stamp Act in 1765 and onward to the Declaration of Independence was the generative fact, as one political scientist calls it, the generative fact in our history of equality. But the other is the Declaration of Independence is all about the right of revolution. And what that means is we spend a lot of time when there's oppression and tyranny confronting us on resistance. So phase one is resistance through protest, through civil disobedience, through economic boycott. But ultimately, when that fails, as it did finally in 1774 for the founders, when Britain imposed the Intolerable Acts, which I could describe, but I won't yet, they realized that this tyranny was here to stay. And so they exercised the right of revolution, which actually meant the right of peaceful withdrawal from arbitrary tyrannical government. So revolution doesn't involve arms. The revolution is a political revolution to withdraw from a tyrannical government.
And that's such an important take because we, obviously both sides are always talking about, oh, give me liberty or give me death, right? As I mentioned that when you're talking, I live down the street from St. John's Church in Richmond, where Patrick Henry gave that speech. The anniversary was this is where I get my dates screwed up. March 2025 was the anniversary, 250th of that, because that was a 1775 speech. It does feel like sometimes people are really misinterpreted. They're seeking an excuse to take up arms. You and I have talked before, and I talk about it, and anybody who watches the show knows I talk about this a lot. I'm not a big fan of armed revolution, right? I lived in a country awash with arms where political fights were ended with a gun. It is not a place to be for us as Americans, but there are steps to that, and we are in that midst now of those steps. Explain that, pull that thread a little bit more so people understand when we say, the right to revolution, we're not telling you to take up your AR-15 and then go off and cause trouble, are we?
Please.
Yeah, AR-15.
No, and I want to say too, I mean, I don't think there's anyone more enamored of nonviolent protest than I am. And I speak mainly about the founders, but my number one political hero in American history is MLK for a large variety of reasons. But no, to be clear about what this concept of the right of revolution is, I'll just repeat, it's the right of political revolution. We have natural rights that support our liberty and freedom. And the way that's structured is through constitutional protections in a liberal democracy or a liberal republic. And once those are violated, according to the history of the American Revolution, they spent 10 years resisting. But then not only did the resistance fail to reverse the oppression after our Tea Party, which was a bit of an act of violence by rebels then, but it didn't warrant the intolerable acts. It was only after that that they made again the nonviolent decision to say to Great Britain, please, the time has come for us to separate and form separate nations. And where do arms come in? They only come in defending your God-given natural rights, which again, the whole history of Enlightenment, or even earlier from the Magna Carta in 1215 to the English Civil War, to the Glorious Revolution, to the English Bill of Rights in 1689 upward, supports our God-given right to these things, our natural rights. So it's never pick up arms and have war against government. It is tricky in almost all cases. How do you withdraw from a government that you were previously deeply embedded with?
Right.
Really, it has to happen. You can choose either, in some cases, and I'm not saying we're there yet, because I think mainly Trump now is playing what is called constitutional hardball, where he's playing chicken with the court system now. But if it comes to it, people do have to choose. Do we live with oppression, or do we exercise, if the first phase, right of resistance, doesn't succeed, do we exercise our right of revolution? I know it sounds radical to bring up. It's just a fact of history. And why not understand history? Why not think and imagine to the future? If we reach a place where there is an illegitimate overturning of the peaceful transfer of power, if there is an overt breach of a free and fair presidential election that's established, what are we going to do? We can either slide into an authoritarian nation. That's one choice. I wouldn't choose that. I wouldn't be on the deliberative body that's going to choose that. This brings us to you're a veteran. It ultimately brings us to, not to be hyperbolic, to Patrick Henry's question, give me liberty or give me death. It's like, who amongst us is willing to die for our democracy, ultimately, to die for our liberties, rights, and freedoms, or those of our children or grandchildren? So that's a real question that we're not confronting today. It's a beautiful day here in San Francisco. Things are well. But there's no reason not to prepare for that eventuality of our history in the future.
And there is sacrifice involved in standing up. We're seeing that already. I mean,
Yes.
hell, I was sued by Mike Flynn for $150 million over a tweet. Okay, so it's like, okay, I mean, he was never going to win, but that wasn't the point. The point was to put fear into me. The point was to shut me up. He's sued many people. Trump's. I mean, now we have Trump and these executive orders against these law firms. The goal, obviously, is to oppress them, is to shut them up. It's to keep them. So there is risk even today to your professional life and sometimes your life. I on this show, actually my Sunday show one time, I had a guy basically post my address during the live show, right, and threaten to come to my home, right. There is for something we said, there really is risk for many people who are standing up and saying, I oppose. It is really an interesting time in that sense. And we have unlimited information. Like for you to get my address in 1775, it wasn't that easy. There wasn't a database. Swatting wasn't a thing, let's say. I mean, we're at a very different time than our founders found themselves in, but there is real risk here to be in opposition to your demagogue government, isn't there?
Yeah, and that's where the oft-spoken concept of courage or political courage or civic virtue comes in. It's not a favorite concept by many in the 21st century, but it's super important. We need to get back to that, and I'm not making a plug for history. History is so essential. You and I were speaking earlier about the need for civic education, and I said, I agree, Fred, but I think we need to be more specific. We need education specifically in political history and political philosophy. That's what we need the most, because in that history is where we learn the knowledge and information and strategies that have been used for hundreds and thousands of years by people seeking freedom to fight against tyranny. And also it's through the stories of history and the role modeling we find in history that we connect to individuals. And so we learn courage through story and relationship. And I can tell you, I'm in a lot of relationship with a lot of book writers, but even more so historical figures, as I mentioned, MLK, uh, Hamilton, Jefferson. So history really is that important. I very much doubt that we could do fine in the democracy without math, and we could do fine without, I don't want to press anybody's buttons, but without can't get along without history, and specifically political history, in maintaining a democracy. I just, as much as I try to imagine it happening, because those subjects, as you know, the liberal arts are in a state of crisis in universities and high schools now. We have to get back to it. We need to, that's a major area of reform. And then the presidential nominating system, for reasons I mentioned earlier, there's just no way we can let demagogues run for president. People might think it's anti-democratic, but I've spoken quite a bit about that, written at least a half dozen articles about it. I'm sorry. You have checks and balances are as important to a democracy as the will of the people, not subordinate, as important. Checks and balances against demagogues and authoritarians are co-equal in importance with the will of the people. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, and to that note, I actually had a fascinating conversation this week with Randy Weingarten, the head of the American Federation of Teachers. And obviously our conversation revolved around this assault on education, this assault on public education, kind of trying to dig into the reasoning behind it. But it does feel like, as I was reading one of your pieces about that it was fascinating to me that you talked at great length, one of your pieces a while ago, about how the founding fathers were students of history. They had read about the revolutions, the civil wars in England. They understood their place in that, and the peaceful transitions they could make. It does make someone nervous that today's, maybe many of us in America today, aren't well read on our history. They are misinterpreting the very things you plan to talk about in the next year about the Declaration, our principles. Do you in your and you teach, you're still an active professor. What do you think is the key missing pieces for average Americans to understand about the Declaration, and why our founders did this, and how is that maybe being misinterpreted today? If you had to pick one. Trick question. Didn't plan on that one. You know,
A part of the Declaration that's being misinterpreted.
perhaps, yeah, the principles that led to it.
Well, as you bring that up, I would say that one of the points of greatest confusion that relates to the founding of the nation, we could talk about the way, particularly in the Democratic Party and progressives, we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. We're throwing out the founders of the nation because they were white males, and many of whom held enslaved people, and others of whom are perceived to have supported in the Constitution. But patriotism is really essential to democracy. If we look at civic virtue, we look at the virtues which are essential to the functioning of a democracy. Patriotism is one. And now I've been speaking about this. I just gave a talk in Nashville a week or two ago. Said, I think the title was, "Should Democrats Reclaim American Patriotism?"
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. And I'm not talking about nationalism. Liberals are beginning to talk now a lot about enlightened patriotism. I tell you, two of the strongest voices right now who are saying, Democrats, get back to patriotism, are Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, and the other is Wes Moore, the governor of Maryland. And it's in fact, a lot of viewers know Josh Shapiro is kind of a bon vivant, and he's talking about the coming 250th anniversary in Philadelphia, and he's saying we're going to be partying on the streets and let's get patriotic. That's his nature. Now, Wes Moore, on the other hand, when he speaks about this, I really love it. He's mad. He says, "What have Democrats done? Why have you surrendered patriotism to this crass form of extremist patriotism that's being hit over the heads of Americans today, which is nationalism?" So I would say that's one of the things. Declaration of Independence is thought to be rightly one of our foremost instruments or milestones of patriotism. But this concept of patriotism is being bastardized. Democrats need to get really comfortable, I think, with the term patriotism again, not nationalism, and say quite rightly, we are the patriotic party.
Yeah.
Another topic, we really do need to rely on the Democratic Party to be the party of reform and ethical constitutionalism, obviously. So it needs to be the party to lead. It needs to lead in the new patriotism, constitutional patriotism, enlightened patriotism. It also needs to lead in many areas reform, including it should lead first in reform of the presidential nominating system. Because, not to go into the weeds, it's the Democrats who first reformed the presidential nominating systems that removed the checks and balances against demagogues. So it'd be great. And then the Republican Party followed. So let's lead again and become a model.
Let's pull that thread. I mean, and you know, there was a lot of angst when Kamala Harris sort of kind of walked into the nomination after Joe Biden pulled out. But in a lot of ways, it does kind of harken back to a different time. And I found that fascinating. I'm sure it may cause some comments here on that. But you've studied this and you've found scholars that talk about how an open primary system where everybody gets a vote and all the primaries are open elections is probably what led us to Trump in many ways. The populism is that kind of pull that thread a little bit for our viewers to understand, like when you talk about this reformed crop, before it was the party, right? The party had, you wrote, the party had a reason to protect itself, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a whole nother show or a couple of hours.
It is. I know. You write too much, Eli. I can't keep up. We got to talk about all, I got my time.
After the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago, where it happened to have been last year as well, but the Democratic Party led the way in putting an end to the convention system, where it was more of a system of representative democracy, that the people represented delegates, the delegates elected the nominees, to a straight direct democracy system where we do still have delegates that everybody knows they have their hands tied behind their backs. They really are empty vessels in a way. Yeah. So that was a layer of check against the rise of demagogues from the nominating system, which now we call the primary system, into the general election. So everyone and their uncle knows that in 2016, if the convention had the power to pick someone other than Trump, it would have done it. The party establishment in 2016 was against Trump. So it was our primary system, which sounds good on paper. It's a democratic process. The people vote. But there are legion of issues with our primary systems that make it a bad form of government. And there's many ways to reform it. Elaine Kamark has written about this. Other people are beginning to write about it. I'll be writing about it. I plan to have a piece that I've partially written that I really want to re-release at the beginning of the midterm primaries to encourage Democrats primarily to begin to consider reforming specifically the presidential nominating system. Yeah. So it's a mess. It's a crisis. You know, the law has the but-for concept.
Yeah.
But for this well-intentioned reform, Trump never would have become president. And as we know, demagoguery gives rise to two other forces, corruption and authoritarianism. So we're just seeing every day in the news, we understand what's going on is with that executive power control of the Republican Party now, Trump, due to the structure of his personality, is every day trying to corrupt the system even more. He can't but do that. That's embedded in his personality. But that's back to Hamilton. Fred, how have you all allowed that to happen? Did you not read history? Did you not read the Federalist Papers? You should have just never allowed this to happen. We allowed it to happen. Now we have the threat of true tyranny. We are where we are.
Yeah, and there we have it. I mean, we are where we are now. We must resist. We must protest. We must have the peaceful protest. I'm part of a protest just next week. This is the last show before I go to Washington, D.C. next week for the June 6th, the Unite for Veterans. I mean, people are having their voices heard. They are getting people's attention. It did drive the Democratic Party to start having town halls in Republican districts. I mean, clearly there is a popular movement right now of people raising their voices and shaking their fists saying, hey, you will not ignore us. You will not ignore the law. It does not. I mean, I think a lot of people do, and this is probably a great place to wrap up and talk about what you're doing next. I think a lot of people also say the next step is violence. So, but historically, that isn't the case, right? This could be major changes in American history have occurred. I did have an expert on a couple of weeks ago talk about how the violence, the civil rights movement was very successful until it turned violent, and then it led to 8 years of Republican rule. In many ways, so we have to understand that we do not have to turn to violence. We have to do everything we can to avoid violence, which we have so far. It's amazing. I mean, it is amazing. Even better than the great civil rights movements of the George Floyd protests. There has been, I'm not aware of any violence whatsoever at any of the hands. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it's a credit to the people who organize these events, a credit to our followers who go to these events. It has remained rigidly peaceful, and it's wonderful to see. But I, as an old cautious guy and soldier, keep saying, don't make sure you stick to that, right? I mean, this is the way of a democracy, isn't it?
I think there's no question. I don't think in the processes that we have learned from the past, and most notably from the British tradition, as I mentioned earlier, the Glorious Revolution onward to the Declaration of Independence. It it's all peaceful on the side of those people who are protecting their ultimate rights. So right now, we are in the phase, clearly, no question, of peaceful resistance, civil disobedience, peaceful protests, economic boycott would help. And again, do we have violations of the Constitution taking place? Well, yes, a lot of what Trump is doing and his administration is unconstitutional, but then it's being thrown to the court. So it really becomes this question of constitutional hardball. What people need to look out for and what would truly represent an authoritarian crisis, I don't like to just call it a constitutional crisis, is that Trump nullifies a ruling of the Supreme Court. As everyone knows, the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of everything in our country, everything federal in terms of federal law and the Constitution. So I'm content to imagine that for the most part, all Trump's legal advisors are just saying, you do whatever you want, and we'll find whatever legal arguments we can to battle these lower courts, the district courts and the Court of Appeals. But I don't actually see for the moment Trump nullifying a Supreme Court decision. Of all things, he said he would not. But the larger point is, if he does, and he sustains that, what do we do?
Yeah.
We're going to ramp up the peaceful protest. We'll probably try and get international partners involved. But do we get to the right of peaceful political revolution and withdrawal at some point? Do we get a secession of some of the states at some point who say, no, we will not live under arbitrary tyrannical government? Of course we'll get to that if we love liberty, if we have any courage, and if we read history. Of course we would get to that in that circumstance.
And I think Trump needs to understand that. Trump and his acolytes in Congress, I can't imagine the oligarchs want that, because that's going to hurt business, if you will. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, I just did an interview with Jean Ali on his show about that. I wrote a piece for Substack this week about, I was going to try and write how this is oligarchy, but then I started digging in. It's a caucusocracy. It's a oligarchy. It's a fascism state. It's all those things in this government represents all of those things. And they're not going to want that. I mean, all of that rides, the economic rides on pushing it to the very edge, but not over the cliff, I think, right? I mean, I think it may not be the traditional checks and balances, but in a certain sense, Trump is driven by ego. Trump is driven by money. All that comes crashing down the minute it gets to a point of revolution. So it is an interesting moment, but I do find this weird streak of optimism. It's a bit of a running joke in the show that, in spite of my years in the Army and doing this for a living, I do believe the best of us. And I believe the best of us, even the most radical people within his administration, are not looking for an armed revolution to occur in this country, because things get dicey fast for everybody and nobody comes out clean. Well, a lot to talk about, a lot to think about. I know you've got things to do, sir, so I'm not going to keep you too much longer. Most important thing, I ask everybody, you got a lot going on. Where can they find you? Where can they follow you? Where can they learn more? There's your Substack up there. Where can they follow you?
It's like a lot of Substacks. It's free with people. If they really like what I'm doing, you can voluntarily pay $50 a year, but mainly most of my subscribers are free. And I'm doing some political commentary, but I really am happy to be telling the story of the American Revolution. What I enjoy to do the most is to write history. And I just want to encourage everyone, let's not surrender the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence because it's somehow patriotism in white males. No, grasp it. It has the secret sauce that will help us to get through hard times in the present and in the future. And I'm going to be writing about that step by step. So far, I've gone from the Stamp Act forward to the Stamp Act repeal, and I'll be picking up again this summer with the rest of the story leading to the Declaration of Independence. And then after that, don't forget, we're still celebrating the 250th anniversary of various things as we progress beyond the Declaration of Independence. So
yeah, that's where I get all confused because there's so many cool things.
What?
Yeah, it's great. That's where I getting confused too. It's like, yeah, a lot of happened in 1775, and and 76, and of course an 8-year war. So, well, we'll appreciate you, brother. Again, I highly recommend folks follow the Substack, subscribe. He needs more subscribers. It's ridiculous. He doesn't have more than me. Having said that, I appreciate you coming on the show. I mean, Eli, it's been a couple years. I'm sorry we waited so long, but I won't wait so long next time, I promise.
All right, Fred. Great to talk to you as always. I'll see you again soon, I hope.
Another great conversation with a brilliant man. Eli is great. I can't believe it's been like 2.5 years to have him on the show. So great to see you guys all here. I love having you here. There's so much going on in the country right now. I appreciate you. Before I let you go, though, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about what's happening this week. Yeah, this week, it's finally here for us on Friday. Next Friday, a week from today, we're going to be doing Unite for Veterans, Unite for America, right on the National Mall between the Capitol and the Washington Monument at 2 p.m. Now, look, this is not just for veterans. We love to have all the veterans we can, but it's for our allies, supporters. We have 3 issues that we are taking to the streets for. Number one, the attack on our veterans benefits, the VA and others. All the things that those men and women fought to attain is being destroyed. The firing of so many veterans to their federal jobs for no good reason, a fake crisis. Number 3, the attacks on our Constitution that so many of us who served swore to uphold and defend against all enemies foreign domestic. This is an apolitical event, obviously, but we will be there to talk about that. We've got the Dropkick Murphys coming. We've got some pretty famous people going to be on stage as well. We can't announce yet, people you've heard of. You will not want to miss this. It's going to be a great event. So look, this is what I need you to do. Go to unite4veterans.org. That's unite number 4 veterans.org. There's an email sign up there. If you are planning on going, please sign up for the emails because that's how we're going to be keeping you informed about what's going on the day of the event, weather, security, whatever you can imagine. We expect thousands. We hope to have thousands. If you're in the Washington, D.C. area, especially, please come. Right now, looking at our list, we have veterans and supporters coming from all 50 states to D.C. for this event. And you may get to see me speak. I think I'm the closing speaker, which is crazy. A man trying to imagine climbing the stage and seeing 10,000 of you in front of me. I hope you're there. I hope you'll tell your friends. I hope you'll share this event. It's going to be huge. I'm so proud to be one of the organizers of it. That's Unite for Veterans, Unite for America, right at the National Mall this Friday, June 6th at 2 p.m. So in the meantime, it's so good to see you guys again. I hope you enjoyed the show today. I enjoy talking to Eli. As you know, we'll be here every Friday right at 7 p.m. Eastern. I loved seeing you guys. My last pitch goes to please sign up for our Substack. That's fpwellman@substack.com. We've got a great deal going on. This is the last day, I think, day 2. Tomorrow will be the last day of our big sale for paid upgrades. We're doing a lot more stuff for paid upgrades. This is 25% forever off. If you sign up now, you'll always only pay you'll be $5 a month, I think, and $50 a year. Either way, I would love to have you join for free. Doesn't matter. I put it all out there. You can get that. And finally, I am so excited. Too Late to Cancel is growing every Sunday on the On Democracy channel on YouTube. That's On Democracy channel, my Substack, all my social media profiles. We go live at 11 a.m. every Sunday. This week, we got another great show, a great panel. It always makes you laugh and have a good time. We believe it's okay to have a laughter in this time of craziness. So I would love to see you this Sunday live on the On Democracy channel, all of our channels. And we will talk about all the issues. And like I said, have a few laughs. That's every Sunday. Mark your calendar, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, which is so hard for our Hollywood friends to get up. In the meantime, of course, I am Fred Wellman. This is the Midas Touch Network. This is On Democracy. Join us every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. I love hanging out with you guys.
See you soon.